I never thought I'd be the kind of person to seek revenge. But when you watch bulldozers tear through the garden your late wife planted, something breaks inside you. My name is Ethan Mercer, and 6 months ago, I was just another quiet homeowner in Oak Ridge Estates, keeping to myself after losing Sarah to cancer last year. The day started like any other. I was sipping coffee on my back porch, staring at Sarah's beloved rose garden that I'd maintained religiously since she passed. It was all I had left of her, each bloom a memory, each petal a reminder of her smile. The garden extended about 15 feet beyond what the HOA claimed was my property line, but it had been that way for 20 years. No one had ever said a word, until Vanessa Harrington took over as HOA president. Mr. Mercer, her voice cut through the morning air as she approached my fence, flanked by 2 men in suits. We need to discuss your encroachment issue. I set my coffee down. What encroachment issue? This garden has been here since we bought the house. Her plastic smile didn't reach her eyes. The board has reviewed the property surveys. You've extended your garden onto community land. We've sent you 3 notices. I never received any notices, I said, my heart beginning to race. And this garden, it's special to me. My late wife. Your personal attachments aren't relevant to the bylaws, she interrupted, checking her watch. The board voted unanimously. The area will be reclaimed today. Today? My voice cracked. You can't do this. I need time to... The decision is final. She handed me a document. The crew arrives in 1 hour. Before I could process what was happening, Vanessa and her entourage were gone. My hands shook as I read the document, full of legal jargon, but basically saying they had the right to demolish anything beyond my property line without further notice. I called my neighbor Marcus, who'd always been friendly despite keeping to himself. They can't just do this, he said, his voice tight with anger. That garden's been there forever. No one's ever complained. Apparently they can, I replied, my throat closing up as I watched a truck pull up out front. I tried reasoning with the crew foreman. I begged. I even offered money. But he just shook his head. Orders from the board, sir. I'm just doing my job. When the first bulldozer blade cut into the earth, taking out Sarah's prized yellow roses, something inside me snapped. I stood frozen, tears streaming down my face as 20 years of memories were reduced to dirt and debris in minutes. Our anniversary roses, the ones she'd planted when we lost our baby, the white roses from our wedding that we had transplanted here. All gone. That night I sat in the dark staring at the destruction through my window. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. They did the same to my father. I know things about the board. Meet me tomorrow, Cafe on Main, 2 p.m. Elena. I stared at the message, wondering if it was some kind of trap. But at that point, what more could they take from me? I had nothing left to lose. Little did I know, I was about to discover secrets about Oak Ridge Estates that would change everything. And little did Vanessa Harrington know that before my corporate downsizing, I'd been a real estate attorney specializing in property acquisitions. She thought she was dealing with a grieving, passive widower. She had no idea who she'd actually declared war on. As I closed my laptop after hours of research that night, I whispered to Sarah's photo on my nightstand, "They took your garden, sweetheart. Now I'm going to take their entire kingdom." The cafe on Main was nearly empty when I arrived the next day. I spotted a young woman in the corner booth, dark hair pulled back, nervously tapping her fingers on a manila folder. Our eyes met, and she gave a slight nod. "You must be Elena," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "And you're Ethan Mercer." Her voice was soft but steady. "I saw what they did to your garden. I'm sorry." "How do you know about me?" I asked, still wary of traps. Elena's eyes darted around before she leaned forward. My father was Walter Chen. He owned the Blue House on Willow Street. The name hit me like a punch. Walter Chen had been in the news 6 months ago, an elderly man who'd committed suicide after battling the HOA over modifications to make his home accessible after a stroke. They drove him to it, Elena whispered, her voice breaking. The fines, the harassment, the legal threats. He couldn't take it anymore. She slid the folder toward me. After Dad died, I found these hidden in his office, safe. I think it's why they were so determined to break him. Inside were property deeds, bank statements, and what appeared to be private emails between board members. My legal training kicked in as I skimmed the documents. This is... I looked up at her in disbelief. Fraud, embezzlement, and worse. Elena nodded. Vanessa Harrington and the board have been siphoning HOA funds into private accounts for years. They've also been selectively enforcing rules against homeowners who question them, or whose properties they want for their development plans. My mind raced. But why your father specifically? Elena's eyes hardened. Dad discovered that the east side of the neighborhood, including his house and yours, sits on land that's about to become extremely valuable. The city's planning a new commercial corridor that would border our properties. If they can force enough people out, they can buy the homes cheap and flip them for commercial zoning. I finished, the pieces clicking into place. That's why they targeted Sarah's garden. Exactly, Elena confirmed. They're hoping you'll give up and sell now that they've destroyed something precious to you. I flipped through more documents, stopping at a particular deed. Wait, this can't be right. Elena smiled for the first time. That's the bombshell. The original land trust that established Oak Ridge Estates has a reversion clause. If the HOA board is found to be in breach of fiduciary duty, ownership of all common areas and board assets reverts to the original landowner's heirs. And who are the heirs? I asked, though I suspected the answer. That's where it gets interesting, Elena said. The Chen family owned the eastern portion, and according to my research, the Mercer family, your wife's family, owned the western portion. I nearly dropped my coffee. Sarah's grandfather sold this land in the 70s. She never mentioned... Most people wouldn't know. But the reversion clause is buried in the original deed. Your late wife, as the last Mercer, would have been entitled to half the reversionary interest, which now passes to you. My mind was spinning. So you're saying, between you and me, we technically own the entire HOA if we can prove they've breached their duty, Elena finished. And these documents do exactly that. A fire I hadn't felt since Sarah's death began burning in my chest. They destroyed her garden to push me out, not knowing I'm the person who could destroy them. Elena reached across the table and squeezed my hand. My father died thinking he was powerless against them. I won't let his death be for nothing. As we sat planning our next moves, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Emergency HOA meeting called for tonight. They're voting on special assessments for your section of the neighborhood. $15,000 per home. They're trying to force you all out. I showed Elena the message. Her face paled. That's how they got 3 families to leave last year. Impossible financial pressure. I gathered the documents, a plan forming. We need a lawyer who specializes in HOA law. I already found one, Elena replied. Miranda Diaz. She's been building a class action against predatory HOAs. She'll meet us this afternoon. As we left the cafe, I noticed a black SUV idling across the street. The window rolled down slightly, and I caught a glimpse of one of the men who had accompanied Vanessa yesterday. We're being watched, I murmured to Elena. I know, she said calmly. They've been following me for weeks. That's Thomas Blackwood, Vanessa's right-hand man and rumored lover. He handles their problem homeowners. I felt a chill. What exactly does handles mean? Elena's expression turned grim. Let's just say I don't think my father's death was entirely by his own choice. As we walked to our cars, the weight of what we were up against settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about a garden anymore. This was about justice. Possibly even murder. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked Elena. These people seem dangerous. Her eyes, so much like her father's must have been, hardened with resolve. Mr. Mercer, they've already taken everything I care about. Now I'm going to return the favor. Looking into her determined face, I saw a reflection of my own newfound purpose. They thought they were dealing with a broken man with nothing left to lose. They were wrong. I had something very important left. The power to make them pay. The office of Miranda Diaz didn't match what I expected from a high-powered attorney. It was small in a converted Victorian house downtown, with mismatched furniture and case files stacked everywhere. But the woman herself commanded attention the moment she walked in. Sharp eyes behind stylish glasses, her gray-streaked hair pulled back tightly. "So you're the two thorns in Oak Ridge's side," she said. No preamble as she sat down across from us. "I've been wanting to take Vanessa Harrington down for years." "You know her?" I asked. Miranda's smile was cold. "Let's say we have history. Before Oak Ridge, she ran another HOA into the ground in Westlake. I represented several homeowners, but she managed to settle confidentially and slip away before we could fully expose her." Elena spread the documents on Miranda's desk. This time, we have concrete evidence. For nearly an hour, Miranda reviewed everything, occasionally making notes or asking questions. Her expression grew increasingly serious. "This is explosive," she finally said, tapping a document showing wire transfers. "They've embezzled nearly $2 million from maintenance funds, and these emails discussing how to deal with Chen are disturbing." "Can we use the reversion clause?" I asked. Miranda nodded slowly. "It's unusual, but it appears legally sound. We'd need to file for an emergency injunction to prevent tonight's vote on the special assessments, then present evidence of breach to trigger the reversion." "How quickly can we move?" Elena asked. "I can have papers ready for filing in 3 hours," Miranda said, already reaching for her phone. "But you both need to understand. Once we start this, there's no going back. Vanessa has powerful connections in this town. Judge Hamilton, who would likely hear our case, plays golf with her husband every Sunday." I thought of Sarah's destroyed garden, of Walter Chen's desperate final act. "I don't care who her friends are. She destroyed something irreplaceable." Miranda studied me for a moment. "This isn't just about a garden, is it?" "No," I admitted. "It's about power and how it's wielded. They use the rules to crush people who can't fight back. I won't let them do it anymore." "Good," Miranda said, her expression softening slightly. "Righteous anger is fuel for the long fight ahead." As Miranda made calls, Elena and I stepped outside for some air. The afternoon sun was warm, but I felt a chill thinking about the HOA meeting scheduled for that night. "We might not get the injunction in time," I said. Elena nodded grimly. "Then we need a backup plan. The meeting is public. All homeowners can attend." "You're thinking we confront them directly?" The thought made my stomach knot. Not confront. Expose. Elena pulled out her phone, showing me a screen. "I've been gathering testimonies from other victimized homeowners. 12 families so far. They're all willing to attend tonight." Just then, my phone rang, a local number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Mercer?" A man's voice, hushed and nervous. "This is Raymond Patel. I'm the HOA treasurer. I put the phone on speaker for Elena to hear. What do you want, Mr. Patel? I know what Vanessa has been doing. The special assessments, the targeted enforcement, all of it. I've been keeping records. His voice trembled. I never agreed to what happened to your property or to Mr. Cheney. Elena and I exchanged looks of surprise. Why are you calling me? I asked. Because they're planning something worse tonight. Not just assessments. They're going to vote to place liens on 3 properties, yours included, for alleged ongoing violations. They've falsified documentation showing you've ignored multiple notices. My blood ran cold. A lien would prevent me from selling my house except to one of their approved buyers at whatever price they dictated. Why are you telling us this? Elena demanded suspiciously. Because I'm named in the embezzlement papers you've been collecting, he replied, shocking us both. Yes, I know about your meeting with Attorney Diaz. Thomas Blackwood has been following you, but I want immunity. I'll testify against Vanessa and the others. Miranda, who had joined us and was listening, took the phone. Mr. Patel, this is Miranda Diaz. What exactly are you offering? Everything, he whispered. Account numbers, board meeting recordings, emails discussing how to remove problem residents, and something else, a private meeting between Vanessa and developers from Criterion Partners last month, where they discussed the commercial rezoning plan. Miranda's eyebrows shot up. Be at my office in 30 minutes. Bring everything you have. After hanging up, Miranda turned to us. This changes things. With an insider willing to testify, we can go straight to the district attorney. But will that stop tonight's meeting? I asked. No, Miranda admitted. Legal wheels turn too slowly, but it gives us leverage. As we walked back into her office, I noticed Elena looked pale. What's wrong? I asked. This is bigger than I thought, she said quietly. If they're working with Criterion Partners, that means Mayor Ridgway is involved. He sits on their board of directors. Miranda nodded grimly. Now you understand what we're up against. This isn't just an HOA gone rogue. It's systematic corruption. They're using homeowner associations as legal weapons to force property transfers. The weight of it all threatened to crush me. I'd started this wanting justice for Sarah's garden, and now found myself in the middle of a conspiracy that reached into city government. I thought about backing down, returning to my quiet grief, selling my house, moving away. It would be easier, safer. Then my phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from Vanessa Harrington directly. Mr. Mercer, I noticed you've been making inquiries about HOA matters. As a courtesy before tonight's meeting, I wanted to offer you a solution. Oak Ridge Estates is prepared to purchase your property at market value plus 10%. This offer expires at 6 p.m. today. Consider it carefully. Some battles aren't worth fighting. VH. I showed the email to Miranda and Elena. They're scared, Miranda said, her eyes gleaming. They know you found something. In that moment, any doubt I had vanished. They think everyone has a price, I said, deleting the email. They're about to learn they're wrong. As we prepared our strategy for the night's confrontation, I felt Sarah's presence beside me stronger than ever. She had always fought for what was right, even when it was difficult. Tonight I would do the same, not just for her garden, but for Walter Chen, for Elena, and for everyone else this corrupt board had harmed. The HOA had demolished my land, not knowing I now had the power to take everything from them. By tomorrow, they would understand exactly who they were dealing with. The Oak Ridge Estates Community Center was packed by the time I arrived. Homeowners filled every chair with more standing along the walls. I recognized many faces from years of living in the neighborhood, but was surprised by how many were unfamiliar. Vanessa had been recruiting allies. Elena met me at the door, Raymond Patel nervously fidgeting beside her. "Miranda's on her way with the emergency filing," she whispered. "She'll be here any minute." I nodded, scanning the room. The board members sat at a long table at the front. Vanessa in the center, flanked by Thomas Blackwood, and 4 others I recognized from community events but had never really known. Their faces were masks of professional calm, betraying nothing of the corruption behind their actions. "Good evening, everyone." Vanessa began precisely at 7 o'clock, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Thank you for attending this emergency session. We have several pressing matters requiring immediate attention." I felt eyes on me and turned to see Marcus giving me a subtle nod from across the room. Beside him were several other homeowners Elena had contacted. Mr. Abernathy, who'd lost his custom fence, Mrs. Lim, who'd been fined repeatedly for her non-conforming vegetable garden, the Johnsons, who'd nearly gone bankrupt fighting citations over their son's therapy ramp. Our first agenda item concerned special assessments for infrastructure improvements in sections 3 through 5. Vanessa continued smoothly. As detailed in the proposal distributed last week, these necessary improvements require a one-time assessment of $15,000 per household. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Most residents hadn't received any proposal. "Due to the urgent nature of these repairs, payment will be due within 30 days, she added. "Any homeowner unable to meet this obligation may apply for a payment plan with interest or consider our community assistance program." I knew what the community assistance program was, a predatory buying scheme where the HOA purchased distressed properties at a fraction of their value. "Before we vote," Vanessa continued, "are there any questions?" I stood up. "Yes, I have several." Vanessa's professional smile didn't falter, but I caught the flash of irritation in her eyes. "Mr. Mercer, of course, please keep it brief." "I'd like to know why the HOA financial statements show a reserve fund of $1.7 million, yet you're claiming we need emergency assessments for infrastructure." Silence fell over the room. Vanessa's smile tightened. "Those reserves are allocated for other projects. This is a separate matter." "Separate like the HOA funds transferred to Cayman account number 857294663? I asked calmly. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Beside her, Thomas Blackwood straightened, his hand moving to his jacket pocket. "I don't know what you're implying," Vanessa said, her voice slightly higher. "But this is not the appropriate forum for baseless accusations." "Nothing baseless about bank records," I replied, opening my folder. "Or about the recorded meeting between you and Criterion Partners, discussing how to force homeowners in sections 3 through 5 to sell below market value so the land can be rezoned commercial." Gasps and angry murmurs spread through the room. Vanessa banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order. This meeting will maintain order," she demanded, but the murmurs only grew louder. "Vanessa," Raymond Patel spoke up suddenly, his voice shaking. "They know everything. The embezzlement, the selective enforcement, the kickbacks from contractors." "Raymond, you need to stop talking immediately," Thomas growled. Elena stood up next. "My father was Walter Chen. Before he died, before you drove him to suicide, he gathered evidence of your corruption, evidence I've now turned over to the district attorney." Chaos erupted in the room. Homeowners were shouting questions, board members looking panicked. Vanessa banged her gavel furiously until the handle broke. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted above the noise. "Actually, it's not," came a commanding voice from the door. Miranda Diaz strode in, followed by 2 police officers and a woman in a business suit. "By order of Judge Lennox, this HOA board is temporarily suspended pending investigation of financial improprieties and the appointment of a court receiver." She handed documents to a stunned Vanessa. These officers are here to secure all HOA records and computers. And Ms. Rivera here represents the district attorney's office, which is very interested in your relationship with Criterion Partners. Thomas Blackwood suddenly bolted for a side door. One of the officers went after him while several homeowners blocked his path. Vanessa's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. "You can't do this," she sputtered, looking directly at me. "We offered you a fair deal. You could have just taken the money and moved on." I walked slowly to the front of the room, facing her across the table. "Some things aren't for sale, Ms. Harrington. My wife's garden was sacred to me. You destroyed it to try to drive me away, never bothering to learn who I was or what I was capable of." "What exactly are you capable of?" she sneered, still defiant despite everything crumbling around her. I placed the final document on the table, the original deed with the reversion clause highlighted, taking everything you thought you controlled. According to this, with the board's breach of fiduciary duty now documented, ownership of all HOA assets and common areas reverts to the original landowner's heirs. I pointed to myself, then to Elena. That would be us. The look of dawning horror on Vanessa's face was something I'll never forget. For the first time, she was truly speechless. As the police began collecting documents and Miranda explained next steps to the stunned homeowners, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The night air was cool and still. I looked toward my home, to the space where Sarah's garden had been. "We did it, sweetheart," I whispered. "We stopped them." I felt a presence beside me and turned to find Elena. "What happens now?" she asked softly. I looked back at the community center where neighbors were talking animatedly, many looking relieved and hopeful for the first time in years. "Now we rebuild," I said. "Not just my garden, but this whole community. Together." Elena nodded, tears in her eyes. "My father would have liked that." As we stood there, I realized something important had changed within me. The hollow grief that had consumed me since Sarah's death had been joined by something new. Purpose. In fighting for her garden, I'd found a way to honor her memory that felt right. Tomorrow would bring legal battles, community meetings, and the long process of healing a neighborhood wounded by years of corruption. But for the first time since I'd watched the bulldozers tear through Sarah's roses, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The HOA had demolished my land, thinking I was just another powerless homeowner they could bully into submission. Instead, they'd awakened something they never expected. A man determined to fight not just for himself, but for everyone they'd ever harmed. In destroying my past, they'd inadvertently given me a future. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices outside my window. Pulling aside the curtains, I was stunned by what I saw. At least 20 neighbors in my backyard, working together with shovels and wheelbarrows. I threw on clothes and rushed outside. "What's all this?" Marcus approached with a smile, carrying a flat of yellow rose bushes, the same variety Sarah had loved. "Thought we'd help restore what was taken," he said simply. Mrs. Lim came forward with garden tools. "We all knew how much this garden meant to you and Sarah. None of us spoke up when they destroyed it. This is our way of making it right." Emotion caught in my throat as I looked around. People I'd barely spoken to in years were working side by side, clearing debris, preparing soil, planting new roses. Elena was directing a small group reconstructing the stone path that had wound through Sarah's garden. "We found Sarah's original garden plans," Elena explained, showing me weathered sketches. "The HOA kept records of everything they targeted for removal. These were in their files." I ran my fingers over Sarah's handwriting, her careful notes about each plant's needs. "How did you get these?" "Miranda," she said. The judge granted us full access to all HOA records as part of the receivership. We found a lot more than we expected. Raymond Patel approached hesitantly, looking out of place among the neighbors. Mr. Mercer, I found something you should see. He handed me a folder. It's every property where they falsified violations or created punitive enforcement. There are 47 homes affected, including 8 foreclosures they engineered. I leafed through the documents, anger rising again. We'll make this right for everyone, I promised. As I spoke, a black sedan pulled up to my curb. Miranda stepped out, followed by the woman from the district attorney's office. Morning, Ethan, Miranda called. Miss Rivera has some news. The prosecutor looked pleased. We executed search warrants at the homes of all board members at dawn. The evidence we've already found is substantial. Thomas Blackwood had a safe with $300,000 cash and documentation of bribes paid to city officials for inside information on development plans. What about Vanessa? I asked. Miss Rivera's smile turned grim. Currently being processed on multiple felony charges. Her husband is cooperating in exchange for consideration. It seems she kept him in the dark about most of it. As they spoke, I noticed a tall, distinguished man watching from the sidewalk. He approached slowly when he saw me notice him. Mr. Mercer, I'm David Chen, Walter's brother. Elena called me. His resemblance to Elena was unmistakable. I wanted to thank you. Walter suffered greatly in his final months. Knowing that those responsible are facing justice brings our family some peace. I shook his hand. It was Elena who made this possible. She's quite remarkable. David nodded, pride evident in his eyes as he watched his niece organizing the garden restoration. She's like her father, stubborn when she believes in something. Throughout the day, more neighbors arrived. Someone brought food, another music. What had started as a garden restoration became an impromptu community gathering. People who had been isolated by fear of the HOA's retaliation were reconnecting, sharing stories of Vanessa's tyranny. Around noon, Miranda pulled me aside. We need to talk about what happens next. The reversion clause is valid. The court confirmed it this morning. You and Elena now legally control all HOA assets and common areas. I haven't even thought about what that means, I admitted. It means you have power, she said simply. The question is, what will you do with it? Before I could answer, my phone rang, a Seattle number. My old law firm where I'd worked before being downsized. Ethan, Jack Whitaker here. Heard you've been practicing law again without us, my former boss said with a chuckle. Word travels fast, I replied, surprised. Small legal world. Miranda Diaz is an old friend. Listen, that corporate restructuring job I had to let you go from? The company's expanding again. They want their legal team rebuilt, and I immediately thought of you. Senior position, better salary than before. What do you say? A month ago, I would have jumped at the chance to return to my old life. Now, looking at the community coming together in my backyard, I wasn't so sure. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, offers open for a week. After hanging up, I found Elena by the newly planted rose bushes. Something wrong? She asked, noticing my expression. I told her about the job offer. It's what I've been hoping for since the layoff. Financial security, professional status. But, she prompted. But I look around here and see something that matters more, I admitted. These people need help rebuilding their community after what Vanessa did. Elena studied me thoughtfully. What if you could do both? We own the HOA now. We could reform it completely. Create something that actually serves the community instead of controlling it. The idea took root immediately. A homeowners advocacy association instead of an authority, I mused. Focused on community support rather than restrictions? Exactly, Elena nodded eagerly. And given what we have uncovered about corrupt development practices, I bet other neighborhoods need similar help. You were a real estate attorney. You understand this world. By evening, as neighbors reluctantly began heading home, the garden had taken shape. It wasn't Sarah's garden yet, that would take time. But it was a beginning. Something new built on foundations of what was lost. As I stood watching the sunset paint the newly turned earth in golden light, David Chen approached again. Elena told me your idea about reforming the HOA model, he said. Walter would have loved it. He always said communities should support members, not restrict them. It's just an idea at this point, I admitted. David's expression turned serious. I run a community development foundation. We fund neighborhood improvement projects across 3 states. If you're serious about creating a new model for homeowners associations, I'd like to discuss backing your efforts. I stared at him in surprise. You would? He nodded firmly. What happened to Walter, to you, to all these people? It's happening everywhere. Predatory HOAs have become investment vehicles for developers rather than community supports. Someone needs to change that. He handed me his card. Think about it. As darkness fell and the last neighbors left, I sat alone on my porch steps. The garden space, though still mostly bare earth, felt different now. It wasn't just mine anymore, it belonged to all of us who had worked on it today. Sarah would have loved that. She had always said gardens were meant to be shared. I took out my phone and looked at Jack's message about the Seattle job. Then I looked at David Chen's business card. 2 paths forward, both with merit. The old me would have chosen security and familiarity without hesitation. But the man who had watched bulldozers destroy his wife's garden and then fought back against seemingly impossible odds was different. That man had discovered something important about himself and about community. I texted Jack. Thank you for the offer, but I've found a new purpose here. I need to see it through. Then I sent a message to David Chen. I'd like to discuss your foundation support. Let's change how HOAs work. Finally, I texted Elena, you were right. We can build something better from this. Let's start tomorrow. As I headed inside, I glanced back at the garden space one last time. For a moment in the moonlight, I could almost see Sarah there among her beloved roses, smiling her approval. They had demolished our land, never realizing they were giving us the opportunity to build something far more important in its place. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The garden bloomed again, not an exact replica of Sarah's creation, but a new living memorial that incorporated her vision while reflecting the community that had built it together. Yellow roses stood prominently in the center, surrounded by contributions from neighbors, Mrs. Lim's herbs, Marcus's native wildflowers, and a small Zen corner designed by Elena in honor of her father. What had begun as a personal restoration project had transformed into Oak Ridge's first community garden. On weekends, neighbors gathered to tend the plants, share harvests, and most importantly, talk openly without fear. The legal aftermath of Vanessa's regime continued to unfold. She and Thomas Blackwood had accepted plea deals, trading information for reduced sentences. Their testimony implicated 2 city council members and a county commissioner in the development scheme. The Criterion Partners deal collapsed completely, their stock plummeting when the scandal broke. More significantly, we had successfully reformed the HOA structure. Using the reversion clause as leverage, Elena and I had dissolved the old punitive model and created the Oak Ridge Community Association, a democratic organization focused on genuine neighborhood improvement rather than enforcement. You're sure about this? Miranda asked as we sat in her office, reviewing the final documents that would permanently transfer control of common areas to the new community trust we'd established. Absolutely, I replied, signing the papers. No one person or small board should have the kind of power Vanessa abused. This way, major decisions require a 2/3 vote of all homeowners. Elena signed next. And the trust ensures the land can never be commercialized or developed against residents' wishes. Miranda smiled, gathering the papers. You two have accomplished something remarkable. The Oak Ridge model is already being studied by 3 other neighborhoods facing similar problems. That was the most unexpected development of all. With David Chen's foundation support, we had launched the Homeowner Advocacy Project, offering legal assistance to communities fighting predatory HOAs. I now split my time between consulting for Jack's firm remotely and directing the advocacy project, finding a balance that felt right. As we left Miranda's office, Elena looped her arm through mine, a gesture that had become comfortable over months of working closely together. Our relationship had evolved gradually from allies to friends to something more, a tender connection neither of us had sought but both welcomed. Ready for the garden dedication? She asked. I nodded, thinking of the handcrafted bench we'd installed yesterday, inscribed with Sarah's favorite quote, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." The community had gathered by the time we arrived at the garden. Former adversaries now stood side by side. Mr. Abernathy chatting with the Johnsons, Raymond Patel, now working with the district attorney's office, deep in conversation with David Chen. Marcus approached with a grin, handing me a small envelope. Found this in my attic yesterday. Thought you should have it. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. Sarah kneeling in her garden, looking up at the camera with soil-covered hands and a radiant smile. I'd forgotten Marcus had been an amateur photographer when we first moved to the neighborhood. This was taken the week after you moved in, he explained. She told me she was planting roots that would last forever. Turns out she was right, just not in the way any of us expected. As I clutched the precious photo, Mayor Wells, who had replaced the disgraced Ridgway, called for attention. Today we celebrate not just the dedication of a beautiful community space, but the rebirth of Oak Ridge Estates as a model for how neighborhoods can govern themselves with compassion and integrity. He gestured toward me and Elena. These two individuals took a personal tragedy and transformed it into community triumph. The legislation inspired by their work, the Homeowner Protection Act, passed unanimously last week, bringing new accountability to homeowners associations throughout our state. Applause rippled through the crowd. It still felt surreal that our fight had sparked broader reform. After the ceremonial ribbon cutting, people mingled through the garden pathways, admiring the summer blooms. I found a quiet moment alone by Sarah's yellow roses, placing Marcus's photograph carefully against the center bush. "We did it, love," I whispered. Something beautiful grew from what they destroyed. I felt Elena's hand slip into mine. "She would be proud," she said softly. "Of both of us," I agreed, thinking of Walter Chen, too. Later, as sunset painted the garden in golden light, neighbors lingered over shared food and conversation. Children played tag between garden beds. Elderly residents rested on benches, and former enemies found common ground in their shared victory over corruption. Standing at the garden's edge, watching it all, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had changed in a year. Grief had given way to purpose. Isolation had been replaced by community. What began as one man's fight to protect his wife's memory had become something far more powerful. A movement for change, a reclamation of power for the powerless. The HOA had demolished my land, never knowing I would eventually own their entire operation. But ownership, I discovered, wasn't what mattered. What mattered was what we built together from the ruins. As neighbors raised glasses in a toast to new beginnings, I looked around at the faces, Elena, Marcus, the Chens, even Raymond Patel. and finally understood what Sarah had meant when she said gardens were about believing in tomorrow. Tomorrow had arrived, and it was blooming all around us.